Hi, I'm Rob Trzcinski. I'm running for Congress in, well, that's an interesting question. What district am I running in? Well, it's Virginia's 5th district for now, but it's going to be the 6th if the referendum goes through. And okay, let's back up. The first thing I found when I go out and talk to voters is they're confused about the whole thing. So I'm offering up an explainer here about what the heck is going on with Virginia's redistricting. And then in part two, I'm going to talk about how it affects the primaries out here in Central Virginia in particular, what that means for us, what I'm doing, and where I'm running. But first, why is Virginia changing its congressional districts? Well, we do this every year, normally every 10 years after the census because the population changes and moves and the districts have to be redrawn. So each seat of Congress is representing a similar number of people, which is somewhere around 800,000. So districts are expanded and moved around and to keep those numbers equal as people move around over the years. But wait, didn't we just do that? Well, yes, we did. After the 2020 census, the districts were adjusted. And not only that, but after a long effort and lots of wrangling, Virginia did it in a pretty fair and bipartisan way. We have districts that don't make strange shapes and kind of make sense for each region. So the 5th district, the old current 5th district, is this big square of central and south side Virginia. The 6th district is basically the Shenandoah Valley. So we didn't do gerrymanders, which is when one party in a state has control of drawing the districts, and they draw them in a way designed to create nice majorities for candidates in their party and make it difficult to get a majority if you're in the other party. So why are we changing districts already? Well, this starts with Donald Trump. He saw that Republicans have a very small majority in the House of Representatives, and they are likely to lose that majority in the 2026 election this November. So he's trying to figure out how to stop this from happening. He needs Congress to be a rubber stamp and not put up any opposition to him. Trump looked around for where Republicans could get some extra seats in Congress by gerrymandering, and he decided on Texas. It's a big conservative state with lots of Republican voters, but it's got some big cities that are blue spots on the map and vote for Democrats. But if you draw new districts that go like tendrils into the middle of the cities and then go out and take in a lot of the countryside, you can get just enough conservative rural voters, Republican voters, to outvote the urban Democrats. Trump figured out this way that the Republicans could get an extra 5 seats in Congress. So he demanded that Texas Republicans do a mid-decade redistricting. And because this is Texas and the Republicans there are ultra MAGA, they do whatever Trump wants them to do. So what does this have to do with Virginia? When Republicans try to rig the vote in a big state to get more representatives in Congress, you can't expect Democrats to just sit back and do nothing. Democrats are afraid that if we just let them get away with it, they'll do it again, and they'll do it in more states. So California, for example, decided, hey, we're also a big state with a lot of congressional seats and a definite partisan lean, but towards the Democrats. So they had a referendum for, and I'm calling it a partisan revenge gerrymander. And it kind of gets rid of a couple of Republican majority districts in California. But this was a temporary partisan revenge gerrymander with the provision that things will go back to normal, go back to nonpartisan districts, or let's be honest, go back to less partisan districts after the next census in 2030. And this was to keep the principle, in theory, that ideally districts shouldn't be gerrymandered. And that we're only doing this in answer to Republicans in Texas as a temporary emergency measure. And then there was talk about Republicans doing partisan gerrymanders in Indiana and Missouri, a couple of other places. So Virginia decided to get in on this in response to all of that. So why are we deciding this now? Why are we doing this so late in the process after the campaign has already basically started? This has to do with the Virginia State Constitution. The nonpartisan redistricting process was written into Virginia's Constitution, so we have to change that Constitution, and there's a whole process there. You had to propose the amendment in one session of the state legislature, which they did late last year. Then they had to approve it in the next session, which they did early this year. And then it has to go to a referendum for the public to vote on it, which is what's happening on April 21st. But remember that early voting is already open. In most places, you can go to your local registrar's office up to April 18th, or can you request a mail-in ballot? And in the text down below this video, I'm going to link to a guide on how to do that. Can the legislature really do this? Well, there's some question about that. There's a question about whether they followed the exact right procedures to put this vote through. And 2 challenges to the vote were upheld, but they were upheld by a conservative judge in a conservative district, a judge who was chosen for these court challenges precisely because the lawyers knew he was going to rule against it. So those rulings then went up to a perhaps less biased Supreme Court of Virginia, which goes by the wonderful acronym SCOVA. And they decided to let the referendum go forward, and they're going to rule on whether or not it's valid only after the vote takes place. It doesn't take a genius to figure out this is not what they would do if there was any real chance they were going to overturn the vote. SCOVA is not going to let the people of the Commonwealth all come out to vote to approve this, and then after the fact rule that, nope, we're throwing out that result. So the vote is going through, and it's really up to you, the people. Should we vote for this? Is this a good idea? Well, I'll tell you, I have mixed feelings. And it's not just because I'm a candidate for Congress. And I can tell you, it's a heck of a thing to be running in a district that you don't know what it is. And you're not going to find out for sure what it is until you're pretty darn close to the election. But the way I see it, this involves a really deep and important question. What enforces the Constitution? Is it all just on the honor system? And if it's all just in the honor system, what's to stop one really unscrupulous guy like Donald Trump from taking advantage of it? What's to stop him from breaking the rules and expecting that other people will still follow the rules so he gets a special advantage for himself? I don't think the Constitution has ever just worked on the honor system. I think the Constitution works best when people on all sides are really genuinely, personally concerned about following the rules. But it has never just been that. The Constitution also works in the principle of mutually assured destruction. Now, I grew up in the last years of the Cold War, so I'm very familiar with this idea. This is the idea that, sure, we could launch nuclear missiles against the Soviets, or they could launch nuclear missiles against us, but then the other side's going to retaliate, and we would all blow each other to smithereens, and nobody would win. This was featured, by the way, in a lot of popular entertainment of the day. We realized that this was a strange game in which the only winning move is not to play. So this is a question of good old-fashioned deterrence. Now, back in the Cold War, we used to call this brinksmanship. When things got tense with the Soviets, you had to learn how to take things up to the brink of war, then bring it back from the brink. You had to show them we were serious and we would fight back, that they couldn't win. But you also had to make sure we never actually pulled the trigger on all-out war. The way I see it, that's what we're doing here. We have to reestablish deterrence. We have to show them that if they break the rules and do a mid-district partisan gerrymander, we'll do it right back to them and they won't get any real advantage from it. So I think we have to do this. Are the new districts fair? No, they're not fair. The advocates are trying, some of the advocates of this redistricting are trying to say this restores fairness. And yes, it does on a national scale. But it does that by being unfair to Republicans in this state. And that's the whole point. The whole point is to say to them, if Republicans break the rules in Texas, where they have control, we'll get revenge in Virginia, where we have control. So maybe you won't try to do that again. And if you don't like it, don't blame us. Blame Donald Trump for starting this, for making this necessary. Remember, your only winning move was not to play. Now, here's where the mixed feelings come in. Is this dangerous? You bet it's dangerous. We had really mixed feelings about this during the Cold War, back then too, because when you use deterrence to make an enemy back off, there's always the risk. What if this gets out of control? What if they push it so far we go over the brink and nuke each other? And in this case, we end up nuking the American system. Historically, this is how the Roman Republic destroyed itself. One guy would come along and break the rules and norms and get himself more power. And then in reaction, the next guy would come along, break those rules even more to get back at the people who broke them before him. And so on. After a couple generations of this, all the rules are broken down, and one guy finally wins and declares himself emperor. That's why I have some friends who get really uncomfortable when I say the Constitution is kept alive by mutually assured destruction, because they really don't like the prospect of, well, destruction. Look, I don't like it either. I think it's much better if we all restrain ourselves out of a regard for basic principles. And that's the whole idea of my campaign for Congress, which is that maybe the American system should be run by people who actually believe in it. But in the meantime, I think we need to reestablish deterrence because if one side sees they can break the rules and win, then the system has no chance at all. The incentive is just to break it all down. That just becomes too great. And Donald Trump is already doing that in a whole bunch of different ways. The fact is that Democrats didn't start this. Donald Trump broke the delicate balance of power, and we're just trying to restore that balance. That's how we got nonpartisan redistricting in the first place, by the way. It wasn't anybody's first choice. We've been gerrymandering since the beginning of our republic. The whole thing, the whole idea of a gerrymander is named after one of the founding fathers, Elbridge Gerry. The only way we ever get nonpartisan redistricting is when both parties realize they don't gain much in the long run, so they decide the only winning move is not to play. Can we ever put the system back together? Well, that's a good question. But that's why I like the fact that Virginia did the same thing California did. The new partisan revenge gerrymander only lasts to the next census in 2030, then it automatically goes back again. And that's another reason I'm running for Congress, because if the American system is run by people who actually believe in it, then a lot of us are going to want to put the system back together once this danger has passed, once Trump is out of power. And that has to be the ultimate goal here. But first, we need to stop him from rigging the congressional elections. So that's why I'm going to vote yes on this, despite my mixed feelings. Now, I mentioned the other part of my mixed feelings is the uncertainty that all of this brings to the congressional races this year, which, of course, I have a real personal front row seat for as a candidate. So in part two, the next video, I'm going to talk about what this redistricting means specifically for Central Virginia, for the current 5th and 6th districts, and what it means for my campaign.